All right. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to the Arctic Air Studios. If your air is not Arctic, you need to call the Bear in West Texas. Callthebear.com. We got a little Texas Tech football nominees for the College Football Hall of Fame. You've probably seen it by now. We got a little bit of, Ferris Bueller. Today is apparently the day in 1985 that they went to the baseball game there at Wrigley Field. Cubs, Braves, I believe. And then, of course, overrated, underrated, rated right Wednesday. We give you a couple of topics. You tell us how you rate them. We went with old Rangers, great Texas Ranger players from the past, Pudge, Raffy, and Juan Gonzalez. All that tonight here on the daily broadcast in the Arctic Air Studios. Brought to you by Golf USA, 67th in Indiana, Stacy Nicks. They're going to make your game better. They can help you out with clubs, club selection, new clubs, getting grips fitted right, shaft strength, all that stuff. It really, hey, go buy a new shirt. You'll play better anyways, right? Just go buy a new shirt. And by Jeff Fagan, the official fly fishing guide of Raiderland, based out of Red River, New Mexico. Call Jeff. Listen, he took our friend Chad Hasty out fishing last fall, I think, whenever it was. And if he can help Chad catch fish, yeah, he can help you. Indeed, the talking box is on, Damon. You guys know what to do. Share this, put it out there. Let us know the audio is good, the video is good. You do that thanks to United Supermarkets at Market Street. Great supporters of Texas Tech, great partners here in Raiderland. And, of course, all the Western where you see us where? Hey, Boot City, one money-saving mile outside the West Loop on 19th Street or in the Hubaplex. They still have a few shirts on sale, the long sleeve shirts, because it's 100 degrees and nobody wants to really wear. Get them. They're going to be fine in the fall. Go save some money. All right. Jam it up. Hit us on the text line, chat line, whatever you want to call it today, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, United Supermarkets, making sure you get to talk to us tonight. Overrated, underrated, rated right Wednesday. Yes. So, and we're not abandoning college baseball. It's just, we're not doing anything on the super regionals till tomorrow. And we can still talk Tech baseball as we go through, and the transfer portal will still be a thing. I don't want you guys to think I'm abandoning baseball. I'm not. I was just taking kind of a day off a little bit. I don't know what else there is to say unless you want to say something. And if that's the case, by all means, you guys know what to do. But we will get into the College Football Hall of Fame tonight. 4 really interesting nominees for Texas Tech. Texas Tech announcing it yesterday. You've got Byron Hanspard, running back in the mid-'90s. Great running back. I think would have had a fine NFL career, tears up his knee with the Atlanta Falcons, and, well, that was the end of that. That's what happens to a lot of great running backs. Almost like Gale Sayers without the first 4 years of Gale Sayers' career. Then you've got Graham Harrell, a victim of timing when trying to get into the College Football Hall of Fame. Had a couple of really great seasons, statistically and otherwise. Obviously, a huge year with Michael Crabtree in 2008. And then 2 coaches that history is completely forgot in Pete Cawthon, and the other in Jim Carlin, that he came along at a time where it's really hard to make an impact if you weren't playing for national championships. And at West Virginia, at Texas Tech, at South Carolina, some really great years, but never playing for a title. And that's kind of why people forget Carlin. And he had a caustic personality, and egads, he was a fundamentalist Christian. Yep. His nickname in the underground paper at Texas Tech in the early 70s, you had the University Daily back then. Now it's the Daily Toreador. It started off as the Daily Toreador, then it was the UD. Anyhow, it was Morality Fats. He made no bones about his Christian faith. Anything else? Not that I think that's why he's being kept out today. Not that I think that's the big holdup on why Jim Carlin's not there, but he had a personality that just really didn't endear itself to sports writers, J.T. King, certain donors, you name it. So he goes to South Carolina, and if you see the uniforms South Carolina wears today in football, they're Tech's uniforms from the early 70s. You're welcome. Thank you, South Carolina. Should he get in? I think he should. He had success at schools that had typically not had huge success. He elevated Texas Tech out of the morass of the 1960s into the transitioning 70s with the scholarship limitations at 99 initially, freshman eligible. And the next thing you know, Tech's doing so well that Frank Broyles and Darrell Royal decide we got to quit in 1976. He was a part of that. He went to South Carolina, coached a Heisman Trophy winner, great recruiter, George Rogers, for those who don't know. And he had a really, I think, a really fascinating offense that was morphing out of the 1960s. It was not an I-based, although it did incorporate some I-based option and a few things like that, midline option plays, different things that Nebraska was doing, split backs, motion. It was a really cool, innovative offense. Joe Barnes ran it as good as anybody. The vestiges of the offense is what Rodney Allison would run in 76, 75, 76, 77. But Carlin gets lost to history because he wasn't winning championships at a time that was dominated on the coaching landscape by guys who were winning titles. Barry Switzer, Tom Osborne, early days Nebraska, the latter days of Bear Bryant. That in his era, it was a really, really tough nut to crack to get to that level. John Robinson at USC, we should probably throw that in there as well. I'm trying to think of anybody else that I'm missing immediately. That the elite coaching era, during that time, Carlin just couldn't get to that level. And people forgot how good he was at schools that were not traditionally great before him, and quite frankly, not traditionally great after him. CJ, thanks for the kind words on that. So do I think Carlin should be in? Yeah, I think he should be, but he's not going to get in. So let's stay with the coaching track on this. You guys fire your questions, comments, by the way. The overrated, underrated, rated right. We give you 3 topics each day on the website, not each day, each Wednesday. And you can rate them any way you want to. So we gave you Pudge Rodriguez, Juan Gonzalez, and Rafael Palmeiro. How do you rate those guys? Are they rated right? Are they overrated? Are they underrated? My old Ranger fans, jump in on that tonight. And if you got stuff that you want us to rate, if you're watching right now on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, you can give us a topic, you can give us a person, a player, or anything, and you can ask me, and I'll rate it for you. I'll tell you how it ought to be rated. I ain't afraid. Now, Pete Cawthon has just lost to history. A confidant and a close friend of Newt Rockne, head coach for the Red Raiders during the decade of the 1930s. Controversial time at Texas Tech. He got Tech on probation. He would basically get run out of town for not playing enough Texas schools. Yet he also gave you the perfect season in 1938, the trip to the Cotton Bowl against St. Mary's. He gave you Elmer Tarbox. He gave you an identity. He helped create the Red Raider mystique. Him and Collier Parrish from the Lubbock Avalanche, or the Lubbock Journal, the Evening Journal, the Avalanche. I'm trying to remember which paper exactly. Don Williams needs to chime in here. So much of what exists today at Texas Tech, the tradition, the lore, everything else, was born out of the 1930s and Pete Cawthon. He was very innovative offensively, much like his friend Newt Rockne. Very forward-thinking offensively, tried to throw the ball as much as you could. The ball was impossible to throw back then. By the way, that's one of the reasons, and this is not to take away anything from Elmer the Great, Elmer Tarbox, and his interception record, but anytime a quarterback put the ball up back then, 50-50, it was going to go exactly where he wanted it. And Tarbox was great at reading that and picking them off, as good as anybody in the era. He flew Texas Tech to play Detroit, talking about Pete Cawthon. He embraced a nationwide schedule, and he was just a hardwired dude. Coming back from a loss, I don't know that it was the Cotton Bowl loss. Let's go with that. The train carrying the Red Raiders coming back from the Metroplex area. Could have been a TCU. I think it might have been Cotton. He was so mad, he hopped off the train in Slayton and hitchhiked and walked back to Lubbock. That he was so mad, so pissed off that he does that. Tender Tyrant, right there on my bookshelf. Written by Miss Etta Lynch, by the way. Great book if you don't have it. You know. So the problem with Cawthon is there's nobody around anymore, obviously, that witnessed it for the most part, obviously that understands it, obviously gets it. He went on and coached in the professional ranks, I think in the All-American Football League with the Brooklyn Dodgers and a couple of other pro football outlets. But his time, he was at Austin College. He was at Austin College. But really, his intertwining with Rockne is something that I really thought would have got more attention over the years that is not. He should be in for many different reasons. Pete Cawthon, the coacher, as they called him, the coacher, ought to be in. He won't get in. So let's go to the players, and you guys can fire away your comments, questions, and everything else on this. Now we get back to the modern era, and this is something that you guys can probably feel more comfortable talking about, sounding off. You watched it, you saw it, everything else. And I'm not saying these guys shouldn't be in. I'm just telling you why they probably won't get in. We'll start with Byron Hanspard. Hanspard was a great running back coming out of DeSoto. I interviewed him his freshman year, literally first day or so on campus at big Texas Tech Media Day, Southwest Conference back in the day. And I was struck by really how confident he was, carried himself with an element of maturity, spoke about God, spoke about the Lord, all that. You heard the different things that God came to him in the shower and told him to go to Tech, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I covered him every day of his career at Texas Tech. I have never watched a more effortless runner than Byron Hanspard. That you would watch a play and he'd take a pitch to the right or left, 48, 47 stretch, combo, crunch, or whatever you want to call it, G-block sometimes. And you'd watch it and you go, well, nothing really happened there. And all of a sudden it's 2nd and 3. That he got 7 yards, he got 6 yards and nothing. He glided. He ran effortlessly. When he got into the open field, made guys not miss, just ran by them, ran through them. And I don't mean like a power back, and he was pretty strong. But he was, and I used the Gale Sayers likeness, not lightly. I kind of like watching that. But, and imagine this, he comes along at a time when there are a lot of guys rushing for 1,500, 1,700, 2,000 yards. He breaks that barrier. He puts up 2 massive seasons. He's as good as anybody in college football, but you've got other people doing it around him because at the time, in the mid-90s, that was the offense for a lot of schools. It was a stack eye. It was really a remnant of the 80s. It was an I formation, passing base, but I formation. You had your fullback, you had your flanker, and you had the, and this was not really new. It started in the 80s, but it was really big at that point. If we go back and you look at the really good Denver Bronco teams with Terrell Davis and zone block and everything else, you were seeing that in the college ranks in the mid to late 90s. And zone blocking was putting pressure on defenses, and defenses were trying to adjust and everything else. It wasn't the option game. It was big, fat, 300-pound offensive lineman. Clovis Hill, Texas Tech offensive line coach, bragging, that every one of our starters is 300 pounds. Okay, well, there you go. So Hanspard comes along, and he puts up great numbers for mid-level teams. Obviously, they make the Cotton Bowl one year, played Iowa in the Alamo Bowl. I think that was, I can't remember. And then that's kind of the end of it. It existed in a bubble. And then there's the infamous Hanspard 0.0 GPA. He was going to go pro. He didn't take his finals. I've been told, I believe this, that he was passing every single class, and he just didn't show up for finals. And then he had a 0.0 GPA. It got leaked to the press. Tech freaked out. They created the Byron Hanspard rule, and it actually hurt baseball more than it hurt any other sport because the other sports transitioned, basketball and others, during the season. Story for another time. He goes to Atlanta. He gets hurt. Hanspard would be in the College Football Hall of Fame if he hadn't got hurt in the NFL. He would have had a good career in the NFL. I don't know if he'd had a great career. He would have had a good career. And it would have stacked success and kept him relevant and kept him out there, and they'd still be talking 7 or 8 years later. That 2000 season in 97, 96, all in 96, 96, 97. I think it was 96. They'd still be talking about that, and Byron Hanspart's name would be out there. But it will be held against him that he didn't do that. It's weird that you don't think about the 90s as like a running back era, but when Hanspart was there, go back and look at the numbers. Ron Dane a few years later, obviously Ricky Williams, Texas Tech and Texas. It was a running back era until, and we shift gears to talk about Graham Harrell. Mike Leach shows up at Texas Tech. Actually, Hal Mumme shows up at Kentucky, and the history begins and the air raid starts, and all of a sudden quarterbacks are throwing for 4,000, 3,000, 4,000, 3,500, 4,000, 4,000. Do I have 4,500? Do I hear 5,000? Insane amounts of yardage. The worst thing Graham Harrell has going against him is the timing. If he'd been the first one, like Kingsbury, among others, Tim Couch, if you want to go, depending on how far back you want to go on this thing. But Harrell comes along after Kingsbury, after B.J. Simmons, after Sonny Cumbie, who ran the offense as good as anybody who ever ran it, by the way. I'll die on that hill. Nobody ran the offense better than Sonny Cumbie. And then Harrell comes along, and you've got the great defensive side of the ball really coming together there in 7 and 8. Obviously, you've got Crabtree. You've got really quality offensive weapons around you and a great offensive line. And Harrell puts up great numbers and wins games, and nobody's going to care because they all look back at that time now and say, well, he's just wait for it. What are we going to say? I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let you guys type it. He was a quote. Go ahead. Whoever, anybody. We got all these people on Twitter, all these people on YouTube right now, Facebook. You can, thanks to United Supermarkets, you can finish the sentence for me. Even one of my dogs is trying to finish the sentence right here. Harrell was a quote. What was it? Get up here. Not gunslinger. Nice. Maybe a few more people are typing in. He was a blank of the blank. I feel like we're doing match games. 77. Gary Burkhoff. Charles Nelson Riley. He was a blank of the blank. Blank of the blank. I know it takes a little while for it to type in. Thank you, United Supermarkets, for letting everybody communicate and talk to us on the text line, chat line. There we go. Chris is the winner. Look at the big brain on Chris. Product of the system. And they will hold that against him. They held it against Texas Tech quarterbacks at the time. They'll do it again now. So I look at all 4 of these guys and go, man, they should probably all be in there, but they all face unique challenges, and it doesn't help them that, being at Texas Tech, that the perception is not a traditional power. So why should we, get you in there? Why should we vote you in there? I think they all should be in. I think Graham Harrell was a great quarterback. He really was. The other thing that hurt Harrell, and it hurt Kingsbury and BJ, really all of them, is that none of them could go and do anything in the NFL. Now, part of this fact that they'd never taken a snap under center in 3 or 4 years. And at the time in the NFL, you had to go under center. You had to take snaps under center. You just had to do it. I think Graham Harrell's first snap under center, he fumbled the ball for Green Bay and turned it over around the goal line. I remember talking to a scout from the Atlanta Falcons around that time, and we were visiting in the press box one night that, hey, the biggest thing these guys can't do that we need them to do is get under center. Well, flash forward 10 years, 15 years, Patrick Mahomes, what does he not have to do every play? He doesn't have to get under center. I'm not saying any of those guys were as good as Mahomes. Don't get me wrong. But again, you come along at a different time in the era of the NFL, and you're not going to be asked to do certain things that you would have been allowed to play your game, from Kingsbury to BJ. BJ 5'2". Damn it, BJ, why do you have to be so short? All those guys, if they come along 10, 15 years later, they get a chance to be out from under center, read defenses the way they read defenses. That's the hardest thing, by the way. It's not the center snap, although that's not always easy. It's the fact that when you go under center and you start to drop back, half the field is gone to you. 3, 5, 7-step drop. That was the biggest difference that those guys had to do. Or you were running play action, you had to take your eyes away off the defense. When you're in gun, whether we want whether we call it shotgun, pistol, whatever. But when I'm head up, when I'm facing the defense, I see the entire field. I see that guy walk up over there. I change defense, everything else. I can't do that at the line of scrimmage under center. And certainly I can't do it after the snap. Very different job description for those quarterbacks that what they'd done at Texas Tech when they got to the NFL. It wasn't that they weren't smart. It wasn't that they didn't have the arm strength. It just, the NFL had no tolerance for guys who had to wait 3 or 4 years to figure it out. They're not going to do it. That's just the reality of what went on with those quarterbacks for the first, I would say, 10 years of the air raid, and I hate that term, system. And it was all over the place. And now you see it differently. Man, I would have loved to have played in shotgun every snap out of my pitiful quarterback experience. Awesome. But at the same time, I would have been scared to death because then I would have known what was coming on my backside, what was coming on my blind side. I would have had to make decisions, and you have to manage a whole different amount of problems pre-snap when you're in the gun, when you're in the pistol, and it just puts an added layer of responsibility on the quarterback, working in concert usually with the center, sometimes with the guard, whoever's making the call combos up on front. Fun to watch, though. Overrated, underrated, rated right. Pudge, Rodriguez, Juan Gonzalez, Rafael Palmeiro. How would you rate those guys? You can do that on the website. See how this works? We sit here and we talk, and then we go, hey, you can go back to the website, theraiderland.com. You can post your comments on that. You give me a little different drill down. You can give me a little different whatever. As we look back on those great Ranger teams, and back then we thought they were great because, well, they actually made the postseason in the late 90s, and we'd never seen that. Was it 96, the first year they won the division? I remember laying on my couch one night. The Rangers were playing at home. It went like extra innings, and they waited on, and Seattle lost. And the Rangers still weren't done, but they'd clinched the division, and the game was going on. They came out of the dugout, they're waving and everything. I'm like, I guess I can go to bed now. So yeah, Pudge, Palmeiro, Gonzalez. Overrated, rated right. I think, and I hate to do this, I think they're all probably rated pretty right when we look back on history on all three of those guys. Now, Rodriguez, I think, is one of the top 5 defensive catchers of all time. I've never seen anybody throw a ball better. I won't tell the story about watching him do a private workout one morning at the ballpark in Arlington before the Big 12 baseball tournament started in 02, I think. Like nothing I'd ever seen a guy throw the ball around. He's old at that point. He's come back from injury. He's probably rated right. Palmeiro, probably underrated only because he gave Harry Carey the chance to try to pronounce his name in the late 80s, early 90s on WGN. I can't even do it. Rafael Palmeiro. Steve. What? Gonzalez, one MVP or 2? I don't have it in front of me. He's probably underrated when it comes to all-time great Texas Rangers and the whole steroid thing. And I know I used the steroid era. Forgive me. But I think Juan Gonzalez is probably the underrated guy, if we're going to do one out of that bunch, that we look back, and I'm looking at Chris's comment about product of the system. I think it's far too easy to say he was just a product of the steroid era. No, That dude was good. He was real good. We put on the page today, theraiderland.com, a link to a bunch of home runs, like sequential home runs and stuff. I love those things. Nothing but home runs. And I really think Gonzalez is probably the guy who is not disrespected, but we just kind of go, oh yeah, he was really good. No, he was really great. That if he'd been a Yankee or a Dodger, a Cardinal, Cup, something like that, totally different, I think, realm that he'd be talked about in. That's just me. Meanwhile, and it's not slugged on here. So yeah, I saw today on the internet, and I really like the internet. I get on the information highway as much as I can, drive down, that today is apparently the day that Ferris Bueller and I can't even think, Cameron and Sloan were at Wrigley Field in 1985. That based on the footage, based on everything that they cobbled together, that the game that they were at was June 5th, 1985. Cool. Don't know. Hey, bada, swing, bada. So I always got the feeling that it was like going on, maybe like in the spring or something, but it makes sense that it would have been June because they end up, back at Cameron's place and they're in the pool, in the epic pool scene. You know what I'm talking about. So now it makes a little more sense, but in my mind, I always think Chicago's cold and everything. Never crossed my mind it might be that late. Now we graduated from Coronado June 4th, 1988. I don't know how many schools were still going, but yeah, June 5th, apparently 1985, when that game took place. All I know is he was the sausage king of Chicago, and that's all that matters. And I saw that on a date there in 1985, wherever she is today. I wish you well. We had a good day. A lot of those northern states have school in mid-June. Yeah, apparently. C.J. Pudge, fantastic catcher. Gonzalez, underrated, but great to watch. Palmeiro, disrespected for the most part. Was disrespected. I don't know. I mean, he brought some of it on himself. I don't have time to. Okay, I think I got time to tell this story right before we get there. Good friend of mine used to cover the Rangers. I think it was for the AP on like a limited basis in the late, early 2000s, whenever it was. So Palmeiro's still there, right? So my buddy'd be covering the Rangers, he'd be down in the locker room post game, doing interviews and everything else. And he tells a beautiful, wonderful story about a loving family where Palmeiro is sitting there getting interviewed. And then one of his kids comes up, one of his snot-nosed kids or whatever comes up, and, mom needs some money. So Palmeiro's like, hold on, guys. Hold on a second. And he, reaches back into his locker, gets his wallet out, and peels off like $300 bills. He goes, is that enough? Tells the kid's probably like 8 or 9. I don't know. Is that enough or something? And the kid's like, probably need more. So he peels off 2 more, like gives the kid $500. Kid's like, okay, I'll take it to mom. And that's when my friend was like, yeah, we're not living in the same world. I'm covering the Rangers. They're the Rangers. $500 to the kid. Yeah. And go ahead and have a good night, mom. Should have been a baseball player. Should have been a Major League Baseball player. Tomorrow, either or Thursday on the website, theraiderland.com. I want you guys to share this, spread around. We'll talk more Texas Tech sports, more Texas Tech baseball as the days go on. We'll look at the transfer portal carnage, and I don't think it's carnage, by the way. It's just people leaving and people coming in, because people will come in. Don't worry. There will be people coming in. I want to thank our great sponsors like Arctic Air, Jeff Fagan, the official fly fishing guide, out of Raiderland up there in Red River, New Mexico. If you're going up that way, please give Jeff a holler, and he'll get you set up. He's got access to water like you can't believe. And then there's Stacy Nix over at Golf USA. The U.S. Open is next week. He will not be playing in it. He could have. if he'd been a better golfer. But he decided to make you guys a better golfer and run an Open Golf USA at 67th in Indiana. We must at this time hit the end button. So, we hit that. We've got one more. We'll see you tomorrow. Spread the message. Put it out there on social media. Raiderland, we're having fun.